Hi, this is Kara from the Special Needs Mom podcast.
And this is Angela from Especially Organized, Sensible Solutions for Special Needs Moms.
We have this heart for special needs moms. And so we thought, you know what, let's combine forces. And we have come up with what we're calling the Purge Party. And you can pretty much guess what it is. It's a party where we're going to come together and we're going to purge or, in general, accomplish a goal, a small goal together. So we have set this for January 27th, starting at 8 o'clock for my Pacific Coast people.
Which means 11 o'clock for all of you on the East Coast. So this is an opportunity. If you have something on your to-do list that has just been stuck there and you are wanting to move it up on the list, you're wanting to tackle, maybe it's a space or an area of your home or a category in your home that has just needed a little time and attention. This is your opportunity for you to be online with us while you work and have access for us to help you answer your questions, help guide you, and just serve you for those 2 hours.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you can tell like what we've designed is just this very high level of support for that project that you just haven't been able to tackle on your own. The thing that we are envisioning is that you get to leave this purge party feeling so accomplished because you did the thing. You started the year off getting that thing done that you were stuck on last year. And so it's a momentum builder, if you will. You can go ahead and sign up. We have a link ready for you. And we are offering this for $40 for the whole experience.
Absolutely. And we hope you'll join us. I think it's going to be really fun. It's going to be a great group of moms of special needs kids. So we all get each other. We all have an understanding of what it's like to have something on our to-do list, but just we haven't been able to tackle it yet. So I hope that you will join us. We're super excited to bring this to you, and we are thrilled to work with you.
All right. We'll see you all there. Hi, I'm Kara Riska, life coach, wife, and the mother of 4 incredible and unique kids. It wasn't all that long ago that my son received a diagnosis that had my world come crashing down. I completely lacked the ability to see past the circumstances, which felt impossible, and the dreams I once had for my life and family felt destroyed. Fast forward past many years of surviving and not at all thriving, and you'll see a mom who trusts that she can handle anything that comes her way and has access to the power and grace that once felt so completely lacking. I started the Special Needs Mom podcast to create connection and community with moms who find themselves up against what feels impossible. My intention is to spark the flare of possibility in your own life and rekindle the dreams that you hold impossible now. This isn't a podcast about your special needs child. This is a podcast about you. If you're a mom who feels anxious, alone, or stuck, then you are in the right place. Welcome. Good morning, and welcome back to the Special Needs Mom podcast. I suppose welcome back if you've been here before, and if this is your first episode, an extra welcome to you. Wow. That's all I can say about this morning so far. My intention was to wake up early, to have my peaceful morning, and that was going well for a while, to record this portion of the podcast. It didn't go like that. And let's just say I still feel the energy of, I don't even know how to describe it. This is, if you listen to my episode last week about when people don't believe you, I just don't feel like I can accurately describe like all the different things that went on this morning. With the 4 kids I have, and my husband, we had multiple puncture wounds, different people, different times. And obviously I'm laughing, nothing serious. However, some cases still scary. It was just one of those mornings where we needed all the tools we have to get through it. And yet, like I said, I still feel the energy from it. So that's why I'm especially excited to tell you about Ginger, who is the guest on this week's episode. Ginger lives with her husband and 2 sons in Savannah, Georgia, where she was born and raised. She has a bachelor's degree in English and has been writing stories since she was 12. Her first book, All These Things, a collection of poetry about her struggles with depression and anxiety, landed her a gig at Eddie's Attic. in Atlanta, opening up for two well-known poets. And her second book, He's Not Broken, has been praised for its rare honesty and raw emotion. And let me just tell you, that is not an understatement. She strives to make her writing as relatable as possible. In addition to writing books, Ginger has written for many magazines, both national and regional. She's currently at work at her debut young adult novel that's based on a local ghost and her tragic story. Ooh, that sounds interesting. When she's not writing, you can find her in her creative space, Paper Soup Studio, where she does abstract painting, beadwork, embroidery, analog collage, and just about any other creative venture you can imagine. Let me just tell you that I really, really hope that you go buy this book. As I was reading it, I could so clearly relate to what she was sharing. And I think in this episode, as I was editing it, or even as I was recording it, I feel like I used the word I relate to that, or I guess that's more than one word, so many times. Like I just so felt like she got me and I got her. And there was this connection that was created just from reading her words that she chose to share. It is bold. The things that she shares are the things that most of us think about, but are too afraid to actually let anybody know that we are. It's that good. And before we get into the episode, I want to share something I shared last week at the end of the episode. I want to make sure you don't miss it. After talking to so many of you and understanding the value of not being alone in this journey and moving towards what you want more of, for a lot of you, that is freedom. It is the experience of not feeling trapped by the circumstances that you find yourself in because of what these children bring. And I know that might be hard to kind of accept, that it's so hard, that we love these kids so hard, yet we do not love all the ways it impacts our life. So I created a group coaching program. I don't yet have a name for this program, and I actually am going to have the first cohort of fellow mothers, fellow warriors. We get to name it. That's one of the privileges of being the first. And I'd love to share about this group with you. And I invite you to a conversation. All you have to do is click on the link available on the show notes of this episode, and we'll easily schedule a quick conversation so I can tell you all the details and that you can explore what it would mean for you to give to yourself. This is actually the hardest part of working with moms, is they are so willing to give to everybody else around them at the drop of a hat, unquestioned. But when it comes to giving to themselves, that's where they stop. And I am an adamant stand. I don't want to say against that, but I'm an adamant stand that we as moms show up differently. I believe that we are leaders. I believe that we have the ability to impact everybody around us by who we are being. And if we're being somebody that doesn't give to ourselves, it's just like putting like a lid on top of you. Like it stops your full light from shining. Can you tell how excited I am about this group? It is just absolutely perfect. And if I had something like this, just like Ginger says, she wrote this book because she didn't have it when she was in her journey. Well, I didn't have this group either. And had I had it, wow, I would have been able to move into where I am now so much more quickly. And I'm thankful that I didn't, because now I have everything that I've learned and discovered along the way to give to you guys. However, when you have a gift that you're so excited to give to somebody, you know that feeling when you're just like, I can't wait for them to open it because I know they're going to love it so much. That's how I feel about this group. Let's get started into the episode. As you connect with Ginger, as you hear her story, I want you to think about what it would be like to be in a community of women showing up in the same way. That's what this group is going to be, and so much more. It's so packed with value. All right, well, let's get started. Ginger, I am so excited to have this conversation with you today. I've already told you offline how much I'm loving your book, And I'm really excited to share these conversations with the listeners of this podcast. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here too.
I said a little bit about your experience in your in the formal bio that I just introduced you in, but I'd love to hear from, in your own words, how you identify as a mom of a special needs child.
Wow, how I identify. That's a difficult question. I don't know how I identify so much as I just jump in and do it. I mean, it certainly defined me. I mean, I would be lying if I didn't say that was the case, because everything kind of focused around the fact that he had special needs. And sometimes it still does. He's 23 now, but we still have moments that we see bits of that coming out and have to understand that that's just who he is. So, I mean, it's guided me throughout. I mean, it's been having to consider everything about him before I make a decision about things, you know. So it's definitely directed my attitude, who I am personally. It's defines you, I think. I mean, I think that in ways it has to.
That's interesting. And I agree. And in a good way, that I think it has actually made me who I am, or maybe even helped parts of who I already was blossom. Because I think it's also, for me, my experience is
Right.
being the mom that I am to my children, but in particular, this one child, I think has called me forth in a way that nothing in my life like that has. And so I think that that's maybe what you're describing, and like that basically it has defined you.
Yeah. And a lot of people would say, you know, it's like you kind of, when you talk about a child with special needs, you tell them that doesn't define you. But I do think that having a special needs child defines me. I mean, I think you said it best when you said that it kind of opened up parts of you that were maybe there, but you hadn't needed to reference before. But I mean, it opened me up in ways that I didn't know I could be opened up. I mean, because you have so many different things you have to deal with at one time. You know, you've got a new baby, you know, you've got a toddler, and before the diagnosis, you're prepared to handle this in a certain way. Now you've got your guide map. It's like, okay, I'm ready to go. I've read what to expect when you're expecting, what to expect the first year, second year. Then, you know, we got up to year 5, 6, and it was like, okay, there's no book on this, because he's doing some things that do not fit with what
These
this
were
is
not in the books. That's such a good point. That actually, so in going back, your son was diagnosed at age 5. Is that correct?
Age 6, actually,
Age
although
6.
I did
Okay.
see.
So you're looking back and realizing like this chapter was not in the book. Like the behaviors that you were seeing your child, there's like, I didn't read a chapter about this. And that's kind of funny, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really interesting, because I'm the type of person that when I'm presented with something I don't understand, I do extensive research, meaning I Google, and that's good and that's bad. You know, there were so many searches that I did that were just saying, you know, your child's acting out, they're being manipulative, they're aggressive, they're this, but I mean, I knew in my heart that there was something else. I mean, I knew that. And I think that a lot of parents, a lot of moms intuitively know that, you know, they can sense what's off and know that it's not just this, you know, just a kid being a kid, because I got that a lot. Oh, he's just being a kid. And it's like, no, he's not. That's not what's happening here, you know? And the books didn't tell me that, but you instinctively know that about your child.
You know, that's the way that you described it, I think is really, it really hit home. Like the way that you described that instinctiveness, your intuition was telling you that something was off, because I relate to so much of your book, how you're describing this behavior that's out of sorts and kind of questioning how much you push and how much is out of his control and how much do you then try to parent and kind of help get into control. And there's this, and I really relate to that part, because when there's a constant question in your mind as you're trying to parent somebody, like, do they actually not have control of that? It makes it really hard to navigate. And what you just spoke really helps me actually recognize that, like, it's coming back to that intuition and learning to listen to that voice you have as a mom that tells you, like, that guides you. And it may not be a loud roaring voice, but it's a quiet whisper. And I think it allows us to lean into trusting ourselves, recognizing that we do know the difference between a child just kind of being a little turd and a child that
Mm-hmm.
is at the impact of the way that their brain has maybe some gaps in it that would have them producing the results that they are.
Yeah, and it got even trickier with Jake. This is sort of jumping ahead a little bit, but it got trickier with him when he was diagnosed with OCD as well. So he was diagnosed with Tourette's when he was 6 and then OCD when he was 8. But the interesting thing about that is that one fueled the other. And so, like with Tourette's, you can't really ask them to stop. That's like me asking you to stop breathing until I tell you that you can. When you are allowed to breathe again, you're going to be gasping in this air. And it's almost like that with Tourette's, with the tics. You could ask them to hold it, which is very unfair. But when they don't have to hold it anymore, it builds up and it's going to come out explosive. And so with that, you couldn't tell him to try to control it. But with the OCD, you encourage them to fight that. So I had this
wow, yeah,
interesting thing where one, I could tell him, it's okay. I know you can't help it, but with the other, but you need to fight that. But the OCD fueled the Tourette's. So it's like, how do you do that?
I so feel you on this essentially unanswerable question. And I get right. And I think that's what we're all asking ourselves as moms of these children. But actually, let's get to your book because you guys, you have to read this book. It has been, and actually, in full disclosure, I'm only almost halfway through it. I don't know what chapter I'm on. A little behind, but I was like, I'm not postponing this interview because I cannot wait to talk to Ginger.
Oh.
But even this morning, I was reading a little bit more and it touched me at a level that it brought me to tears in a way that was really relieving for me. And I had it was really beautiful. And that's the thing I love most about your book is your real honesty. Like you are actually painting the real picture, not all prettied up in pretty words of what it looked like to be the mom of your child. And your emphasis is clearly on your experience and not letting, Jake be the child that he is.
Right.
So first off, amazing job on capturing, like I was reading this morning about the ice skating episode that you describe in the book. And especially coming off of the weekend that we did where we had some different but similar feeling episodes where when I was reading this book, I could feel it to a level that had me resonate so deeply with your story. And I think that's really, really powerful when we get to resonate. And you actually have, I think, this in your book. When we get to resonate with people's story like that, it really connects you at a deeper level. You talk about this as you found different support groups. And so thank you. It was just really, really powerful.
Well, and that's the reason that I wrote the book is, and I say that it's the book that I wish that I'd had because I felt like the worst mother on the planet because there were times when I wanted to get in the car and I wanted to leave. I knew that I wouldn't do that, but that's just me being honest. It's like my child, even though he can't help it, is getting on my nerves so badly. I don't think that I can take this anymore. I wrote it so that others would feel less alone. So to hear you say that, that makes me feel so good because that is exactly what I wanted to do was to have that raw honesty, because there are so many people who try to make it like, well, it wasn't that bad. Well, it was, it was bad.
I was just, and that's why I love your book because I was meeting with a girlfriend this morning for coffee and essentially, and she's been with us the entire way. She was actually my next door neighbor, prior to me even having kids. And we lived in this lovely little townhome. So we practically lived together. They were that cozy. And so she was with us the entire way. And she does a really great job of reflecting back to me how heavy of a load this is without coming from pity. Right. So for me, it helps me really see yeah, you're right. This is extraordinary because a lot of my habit is minimizing it and kind of forgetting how hard things are. And anyhow, so I want to go back to the idea of just you being so open with expressing your experience. I'm going to read an excerpt. And this was when Jake was 8. So your son was 8. And you wrote, some days I had the patience of Job, while other days I was ready to fill up the car and drive as far away as I could. Feeling that way hurt. It went against everything I believed a mother should be. What do you feel now when I read that?
It chokes me up still because I remember that feeling and I remember how horrible I felt. I can remember talking with my husband about it, but feeling so ashamed. It was just like, what kind of person am I? And I never did it. I never filled the car up and left, which is, what makes it different. But the fact that I had that very real feeling, and I did, it was just this heaviness, like, I can't do this. I am not cut out for this. This is not what I expected. So I had many moments like that. That I would, sometimes I would drive away. I tell my husband, I'm like, I have to leave. I can't handle this anymore. And he was very, very supportive and was always telling me, maybe you should just go get in the car and go somewhere to get away. If he hadn't have been that kind of husband, I don't know. I struggle with depression and anxiety anyway. And so that, and having a special needs child, it's just like, that is a horrible mix, and you really have to learn to manage it as best you can. But some days I couldn't manage it,
I totally feel you. And so, again, thank you so much for sharing that. And I think, that's one of the reasons I started this podcast, is recognizing the otherness, the aloneness that we feel as we are in these situations where we can't even imagine anybody else being in our shoes because we don't see it. You often don't. Yes, there's the times where we have public explosions and then we are kind of exposed. And you talk so openly about feeling embarrassed in those moments. And I guess I just love the voice you put to it, because I too feel embarrassed. And then when we feel shame on top of embarrassment, then that just, I think, further keeps us stuck and further isolates us. So I really love that you were willing to put to words the pain that we as mothers experience when we have thoughts and feelings that we don't think we should about our children.
Right. And, I would always get asked, well, how do you do it? And it's like, if you only knew. Some days I don't do it. It's like, we're kind of thrown into the ring of fire. It's not that you choose to do it or not do it. You do it, you don't have a choice.
Yeah, that comment comes up and I say almost every episode, is that the constancy, it seems like, of other mothers saying, I don't know how you do it. And us mothers being like, yeah, it's not an option. Like,
right.
It's not like you're a hero.
I didn't know.
Yeah. It's like, when a car's coming at you and you jump out of the way, like, you just do it. Like, you don't think, well, should I jump out of the way? It's a response to the situation that we are in. And we certainly would never choose it. And so that, going back to that quote, you said that last part, it went against everything I believed a mother should be. Now, my guess is that along the journey, you've had to redefine what a mother should be as you have parented your children, because you do have another son as well. So as you look back now, how would you say that you have redefined motherhood?
The game got a lot more interesting when I had my second child, because then I was put in the position of protecting one from the other. Not that Jake was harming anybody. It wasn't that, but Jake did have outbursts where he would, just really start yelling at his brother, and in a very aggressive way. And he pushed him a couple of times because Nick, my youngest, was super concerned about him, and he would like lean over him and Jake would just shove him out of the way. And Jake was having a meltdown. And in that moment, that was one of the hardest things for me, is because I had to basically choose a child. I had to stay and try to talk Jake down off the ledge, or I had to get Nick out of that environment, because there's 8 years between them. So one particular time I'm thinking of, Nick was, I think, 3. And so Jake was around 11, and he was just in the floor. And I think it was over shoelaces or something, that he couldn't find the right tension in both shoes. And he had a full on meltdown, and Nick just leans over him and he's like, Jacob, you okay? And Jake just pushes him out of the way. Get out of here. And and I was so torn. And as I'm walking out of the house with Nick, because my husband came in, and I'm walking out of the house with Nicholas in my arms, and Jake is screaming at me, "Please don't leave me, Mom." And I'm like, what am I supposed to do? So that to me has been the hardest part of like defining who I am as a mom, is having to choose sides like that, and not just in, oh, well, your brother's going to get his way this time and you can get it next time. It's a very real, very explosive moment, and you have to protect your other child, from this child who can't help what he's doing.
It's almost another unanswerable question. And because I relate very much to this as well. And I think it's like,
Yeah.
when you, on one hand, have a child that has an expressed need, that they're having a meltdown or explosion or in a fit for a reason, right? It's not usually just for no reason. Now, is it a good reason? Not usually, but that does not matter. That has no bearing, unfortunately, on the actual explosion. And on the other hand, then you have the other children at the impact of the explosion. And I would say that is like holding all of that as moms, it's heavy. And like, I think especially today, I'm feeling that today. So we're recording this the day after Valentine's Day, and I had planned like a really fun trip, and it was fun. It was fun. And there was a lot of explosions, and there was people getting hurt. And so holding the capacity to keep in that compassion for the child that was the offender and the child that was the offended, and being with all their personalities and their coping skills and their youngness, right? When you're 8 years old, we can't expect that you're going to be able to handle this like a 30-something-year-old.
Right.
And so anyhow, I especially relate to like holding all of that as a mom can feel very heavy. And I also want to say that is why I see coaching and working at this intentionally as not just like, oh, that would be really nice, but actually as essential to survival in parenting these kids. Like, not just for the kids, but actually for the experience of the mother, of being able to hold all of that in a way that feels like, okay, I can do this, versus like what we were saying before of like, I'm gonna have to run away because I can't do this. Like, that seems like the only option we have. And I guess that is the heartbeat of the work that I do, is kind of declare the possibility of having it go differently for us.
Right. Yeah. It's just so difficult to choose between the two. And and there is a choice that you have to make. It's not like, oh, well, you could be there for both of them. In these instances, no, you can't, and if you don't have a supportive partner, I do very much so. But if he had not been there, I honestly don't know what I would have done, because Nick was crying and upset. Jake is crying and upset over two very different things, and it's heavy. I think that's about the only word you can use there, is that it's a very heavy, heavy situation, and so much guilt. I am just constantly, still to this day, I hold myself with so much guilt towards things. It's like that time that I had to take Nick out of the house because of Jake. I felt so guilty. I was in tears because Nick was upset. I was in tears because Jake was upset and needed me there, and I couldn't be there for him, and it's really difficult.
Yeah, I think as you describe it now, obviously you couldn't be there physically. And I think that there's so many different ways we can show up for our kids. There's the physical, right? Being there, but then there's also like showing up for them emotionally. And I think that for me, that gives me, I guess, hope that even though I can't always be there physically in every moment, and I can't even always necessarily be there in the way I want to be emotionally in every moment, but but kind of giving ourselves credit that we have so much capacity that we can basically show up in a way that allows us to be there for our kids, that we know that we're there. And I definitely, in reading your book, I know you were there for your kids. Like, you dug deep and you dug hard and you stayed in it. And so, I think that is just again, it's just like the redefining of motherhood. And let me read another quote. So the title of your book is He's Not Broken. And so you talk often about fixing. I'm going to read another quote. I was thrust back into search mode once again. Although I had no idea what I was searching for, it was pretty much a consistent state for me, this need to fix Jake. I believed there was something out there, something that could help. And it was my job to find that it, because I was Jake's mother. And that's what mothers do. We fix things. So again, we touched on this a little bit before, but what do you think of now when you look back at that?
I think it was a natural response to the situation, because I do think as mothers, that's what our children come to us for, with a boo-boo, it's like, make it better. And that's just what I saw in his eyes every time he would have one of these difficult moments, is him looking to me like, help me. And that is the most helpless feeling in the world as a parent, when you cannot help your child. And I tried everything. I mean, the poor kid, I put him through vitamin therapy. He was taking like 20 pills a day and drinking this awful stuff because it worked for someone. And I'm like, and that might be us. So we're going to try it. And bless his heart, he was on board. He was just
He's like, I'll do anything, Mom. Oh my gosh.
But yeah, I mean, and there was that. And I mean, in some ways I still do that today. I mean, he's 23. Tomorrow is his birthday, and he'll be 23, but he still struggles with social issues and with self-doubt. And, he's constantly beating himself up because I don't know how to do this. He's very brilliant. He's a brilliant kid. And so he's all up in here, and he's got severe anxiety. His OCD has kind of laid off some, but not the mental part of it. And so he's constantly questioning everything, beating himself up. And I still look for ways, I mean, to try to work around these things for him and to try to fix it for him. And that's really hard for me right now, because he's 23 and he's not my little baby anymore. I can't, it's not really my place to do that. He's got to figure his own way out, and kind of pulling back from him like that is very difficult for me. Very.
I can't. I'm obviously not at that place, but I think watching your child hurt and watching your child struggle, I think that's one of the hardest. It's one of the most vulnerable things that I think we can do as moms. And I notice that so many of us go towards control and trying to control and manage our children to try to prevent the pain of watching somebody suffer. And man, I wish it was possible. I wish it was possible to actually prevent somebody else from suffering. But unfortunately, that is not the case.
And it was really awful because of the Tourette's, because of his tics, because I remember one particular time he was sitting on the couch. He must have been 6. He was watching Jimmy Neutron or SpongeBob or something. And I was in the kitchen, and I looked around the corner, and I think he was stretching his jaw. And when he stretched his jaw, I mean, you can't imagine that a child's mouth could open that far. And sometimes to get it to stretch even further, he would stick his whole fist in his mouth because he needed to feel that, whatever it is that he needed to feel. Another thing he was doing was punching himself in the stomach. And he was sitting there watching this TV show, tears streaming down his face. And I couldn't do anything. I couldn't even go in and ask him if you're okay, because if I did that, then it disrupted the pattern and he'd have to start all over again. So I can just remember standing in the kitchen, tears running down my face. He's watching TV, tears are running down his face. And I was helpless. Couldn't do it.
I have a child that has a lot of medical issues. So he had a brain tumor, and that's so different. But yet now he has a lot of these other conditions and disabilities. So I feel like I get to like dip my toe into all the little lakes. But I don't know, I'm just present to the difference of having a child that is hurting, and there's no cure, there's no healing, there's no stopping that. Yes, there's helping for sure. And like we would obviously, I think you're a great exhibit of somebody that's done everything in their power to help, but yet still that may not be enough to
Right.
stop some of the behaviors and the challenges and all that.
Right. And to have to admit that and accept that was one of the most uncomfortable things I've ever had to do, to admit that I can't take it away. All I can do is be there for him. And I was, and you just hope that that's enough, that gives them some relief, but admitting that you can't help them and they're sitting right in front of you crying. and he got to the point where he was like, why me? I just want to die. I don't want this to be my life. He was 6 saying those kinds of things and I can't take it away, Oh, it was terrible.
Definitely. Obviously, like I said, I haven't finished the book, so I'm wondering, and you named it, He's Not Broken, but yet you talk a lot about your desire to fix him, and you give examples of that. And you talked even now how it's a struggle, but it obviously you've gotten to the place where you've declared that he's not broken, so therefore he doesn't need to be fixed. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
It's very interesting because he's the one who basically said that to me. This is a kid who, when we'd be out in public and his tics were really, really bad that day, the vocal tics really bad, and people were staring and I would get so upset. I mean, I could just feel myself bristle and, just staring at them like, do you have a problem? Would you like to come and say something to me? And there were so many moments that Jake would put his arm around me, and he was 9, 10 years old. And he's like, Mom, you can't do that. You can't be mad at them because they don't know what's going on. They don't know what I'm dealing with. So how can you be mad at them? And I said, doesn't that bother you? And he said, well, no, not really, because I know they don't understand who I am. He said, this is just who I am. This is just a part of who I am. And I mean, this was a little kid telling me that.
I'm like, he's preaching. Wow, that's incredible.
So he's the one that taught me that he basically told me, Mom, you got to come to terms with this. you got to understand this is who I am. And so, I mean, I credit that to him. Totally. I really do. I mean, of course, I had to be in a place to accept that information, but it was him. I mean, it was him. And it's funny because the book, when I started writing the book, He's Not Broken, and it was about Jake. But as I kept writing the book and reading parts of it to my husband or to family members, they're like, this is not a book about Jacob. This is a book about you, and there it comes in a mother's journey to acceptance, because it was my journey. I started off thinking that I was writing Jacob's journey, but I wasn't. I was writing my own, and that was interesting to, once that was said and once I started thinking about it, I'm like, oh, okay, this is my story. It's not Jake's story.
It's incredible to having read your book and realize that that's kind of the perspective you went in with it. Because I think it was my husband I was telling my husband, oh my gosh, this book is so good. Because you self-published the book, right?
I did, yes.
And so this is horrible, but this year I've read a number of books from friends that are self-published. And while I love them because, man, they wrote a freaking book, I don't expect the gradient of writing and just that to be as good as a book that maybe has like a huge publication.
Right. I feel the same way.
Right. Okay. So, so I was like, great, I'm going to read this book, like so generous that she sent it to me. Like, yeah. But then I'm reading it and I was like, this is not only like really good writing, but it's like just hitting home in so many areas. And my husband asked, like, so what kind of book is that? It was like a novel? No, I was like, it's a memoir, right? I mean, that's how you would describe it. And it's so clearly about you and your journey. And so it's interesting that you thought it was going to be about Jake. So what was the intention going into the book writing? Like, what were you thinking? I'm going to write a book because...
Well, absolutely, because I needed to have this book when Jake was diagnosed. So, I mean, it's funny that I thought it was Jake's book, but the whole time I'm writing it, it's not about Jake. I just went into it thinking this is Jake's story, but that's not the reason I wrote it necessarily. It's funny, I'm kind of coming to this realization now. I didn't write it with the intention of really telling Jake's story so much as I wrote it with the intention of presenting it to other parents, not just mothers, but parents, caregivers who have this special needs person in their life and are having these uncomfortable feelings. I mean, that's why I wrote it, because I felt wrong. I
Yeah.
felt horrible myself, and I wanted to let other people know. And that's why it's so raw and honest, because I needed other people to understand you are not bad. You are managing, you are coping. And sometimes what coping looks like is getting in your car and driving away if you can. And
Yeah.
that's a coping mechanism.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And you've described moments where you've gone into your closet and you described a moment where essentially you raged on your clothes. I love that moment because that's actually there's an exercise that I have done and benefited so greatly from. And at some point along the journey, most of my clients are assigned this practice. It's called anger on purpose. And it's
Uh-huh.
getting to a place where you basically go rip your closet apart, or in my case, it's so much more of a relief to verbally say the things that are kind of quote unquote unthinkable, like you're not supposed to say or think these things, and going
Right.
all the way
Right.
into the anger that is present, that is
Mhm.
in you, right? And like
Right.
unstopping that river. And it is
Mhm.
the most amazing feeling, and it's the most vulnerable and raw feeling. And you described this for us in your book. And that's why I loved it
Oh,
so much. And I think that's the thing that I love about your book is I feel like it's almost like I want this to be shouted from the rooftops because I want all the moms to know that there's nothing wrong with them for having these feelings. And you do this in your book. And that's why
right.
and I think if we continue to shame ourselves for having these feelings, then that of course
Mhm.
hurts our kids, but it hurts us even more. I'd love to
Right.
actually know. So has Jake read this book?
No, but I give him a hard pass on that because he lived it. He says he wants to, but he has not. He's funny because he's not much of a book reader. He gets all his reading online, as many kids nowadays do. But no, the only person, two people in my family have read it, and that's my mom and my brother. That's it.
Interesting. Really? That's incredible.
Yeah.
Look, and the reason I'm asking this is because you do so openly, honestly, and candidly share the experience that you were having as a mom. And I know for me,
Mhm.
right now, my son's super open about he loves me to share stuff, and then there's some stuff that I
Mhm.
share that he does. I mean, he doesn't obviously he's not on Instagram, he's not reading stuff, but I'm like, okay, like when
Right.
he grows up and he like or maybe he listens actually when he's supposed to be in school, sometimes he apparently goes and looks at my website and my podcast. I'm like, okay. Um gonna have to redirect that. But anyhow, long story short,
Right.
I know that this is public information and his eyes and ears and heart could receive it one day. And so I guess
Mhm.
that's why I'm asking that question is I guess you were willing to put your story out there, even though
Mhm.
he may be impacted by.
Right. Yeah, I talked with him about that though, because before the book, and what actually prompted me to go in and write the complete book, I had a blog called Moxie Mama, and I started writing blog posts on there about what I was struggling with, and people started following me and thank you so much for talking about this because I feel this way and I would never tell anybody this. But I talked with Jake first, and he's read a lot of what I've written. He just hasn't sat down and read the whole book because he'll edit it for me. Um, God knows there are so many mistakes in it now, I'm sure. Once you look at it for 10 years, you kind of miss all the problems with it, all the mistakes. But yeah, so he would edit and stuff, and I would make sure that he was comfortable with that because I knew it was going to be out there. I mean, I don't expect that it's going to be this huge, internet sensation or whatever, but I knew that it was putting him in a vulnerable position too, and he's been picked on before online because I have videos up on YouTube of us being interviewed and of me interviewing him, and people, I mean, some of the comments were just so mean. And I'm like, this is a child that you're saying these things about. And it was, I just couldn't believe how mean people can be. And the people who were mean all the time were the adults. He never had problems with kids.
Yeah, that's obviously heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the answer I want to give is like that we have to have compassion for those people because obviously they're hurting too. But then
Right.
the mama bear in me kind of wants to like kick their ass a little bit. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was bowed up all the time when I was out, just like, daring anybody. It's like, look at my son, make fun of my son. And the thing is, nothing ever would have become of that. I am the most non-confrontational person in the world. So having those moments where it's like a huge part of me felt like I wanted to confront somebody, but then that part of me that hates confrontation is like, what is that going to do? That's not going to do anything. So fortunately, I had Jake there to tell me, don't worry about it.
I think I might need Jake in my life too. No, yesterday for the Valentine's Day extravaganza, part of it was going on a scavenger hunt, super simple, nothing fancy. And so we went to this beautiful park that's in San Diego called Balboa Park. And we thought, okay, well, like Levi gets tired. And so we'll bring the scooter so he can scoot and then everyone can walk and hopefully it'll kind of curtail some of the complaining, which it did not. But because of the COVID and because there was a lot of construction, a lot of the walkways were more restricted. And so he was having to ride a scooter in places that wasn't necessarily, it was pedestrian, right? And
Right.
so I'm a person that kind of likes to like follow the rules and do the right thing, quote unquote, right thing. I don't like to get in trouble.
Yeah.
I'm like, again, like the confrontation thing. I'm like, I just don't want to get yelled at.
Yeah.
But I found myself like in a place of defending, like already, like nothing happened at all. But like I noticed myself coming from a place of, is somebody going to say something to him about him being on a scooter, like, or roll their eyes because the kid's on a scooter? And because also he's my son is blind in one eye and then his peripheral vision and other is not amazing. So and actually like about a month ago, we were riding bikes at a park and he actually ran into an older couple and the man yelled at him and it of course like really, really devastated Levi, devastated me too, because I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is sad on all fronts. One for the person that got hurt and had no idea that this child's condition and then devastated for Levi because he got yelled at by a man rightfully, like the guy was upset. Like he's thinking some kid just ran into my wife.
Right.
And where am I going with this? I'm going with the idea that I guess I really relate when you were saying like this inner conversation of defending and trying to protect my child and myself, right? Because I'm, again, the responsible adult that's supposed to be parenting my child in a way that they're not like running into people or riding scooters where they're supposed to be walking.
Yeah.
And you talk a lot about this in your book, and I love it so much. How about kind of like you're feeling embarrassed and those feelings coming up for you. And I just so much love that you put a voice to this because I don't think that it's yet normalized enough. All the feelings that we have as moms that come up, especially as we parent these particular kids.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I can't tell you how many times I was embarrassed. I mean, there were plenty of times that I wasn't, but when he would, because part of Tourette's is rage. You get these rage episodes, which are, I'm sure, completely based out of frustration. I mean, if you're walking around, you're literally a time bomb ticking constantly, yeah, you're going to get upset and things frustrate you. And so, but yeah, when he would have those episodes, I mean, I remember one time we were in Walmart and this was probably just a normal kid episode, but he was throwing a fit over something which was made even worse by his conditions, so it was very elevated. And I can remember I was so embarrassed and ashamed because everybody, I mean, even in Walmart, I was embarrassed. You don't get in Walmart. But I was embarrassed. And I remember telling him, because he wouldn't come to me, I'm like, we are leaving, get over here. And I remember looking at him and I said, do you see that police officer? I said, I will tell him to come over here. And he's like, you wouldn't do that. And inside I'm going, I know I wouldn't do that, but I need you to jump up to me. I need you to do what you're supposed to do. But just so embarrassing, so embarrassing. I mean, just having a typical kid throwing a fit is embarrassing enough. But when you have this lack of control and there's other stuff going on, Oh, it
I
was
think the thing is,
exhausting. It really was.
I think the challenge, like, okay, so if I look even at myself yesterday, I was like, what I want to do is be able to shout to everybody, he's physically disabled. He has visual impairment. We're supposed
Right.
to be here, but obviously I can't. And then
Right.
I'm cognizant of like that my son's there. And so I don't want to be like yelling, like convincing him of his disability versus like his
Right.
ability. And so I'm like, it's one of those things where, again, I don't know that there's an answer to this, but I think just acknowledging the existence of the feelings that come up for us and that and I know that they're all based in and rooted in beliefs and things that we are just programmed as a society or maybe even as we were raised, and that they're all questionable, like that we have the opportunity to really rewrite some of them, and some of them we may not want to rewrite, right? Like some of them, like it's not like we want to rid ourselves of every negative feeling.
Right.
That's not the goal, but some of them I think that I know that questioning them has been really, really valuable for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And actually, I want to read one last excerpt. Here's the context. This is a conversation that you're having with your mom in your closet after you were, I think you had come home. It was not a good day. And your mom, I
No, it
think,
was not.
said, every family has a bad day. You said, not like ours, I said in a wavering voice. And I think in this moment, what I took from that is that you were essentially saying, we shouldn't be like this. This is not right. Pointing to the underlying belief that you shouldn't be this way, like that either your son shouldn't be this way, you shouldn't be this way, the world shouldn't be this way. And that actually, kind of from a coaching perspective, is like the universal human paradigm. Like we all actually believe that about one thing or another. And so I wanted to get your thoughts just on this now as you look back, and obviously as you've journeyed more towards acceptance. What are your thoughts on now about the idea that it shouldn't have been that way?
I think one of the things that I meant when I said that to her is because the easy things were even difficult with us. And when you're talking about taking your kids out yesterday, I can completely relate to that, because any little thing that we tried to do as a family, it just seemed like it would fall apart. I mean, and we'd go in with the best of intentions, and that seemed to be, on certain levels, like a daily thing. And so when she said, every family has a bad day, it's like, okay, but we're having one all the time,
Do you
over
think,
little things.
sorry to interrupt you, but do you think that you just wanted more credit for how hard it was in that moment?
Possibly. I think I was probably being kind of defensive because I didn't want it to be taken that lightly, because it wasn't light for me at all. The just saying every family has a bad day. It's like, we're different. We're a different kind of
Yeah.
family.
Yeah, I totally get that. It's like you weren't looking for it to be normalized, that it was hard, because
Right.
you obviously knew it was hard. You were looking to say, no, this is extraordinary. Not that that was like the
Right.
end all, like we could go on, but I think maybe it's like just having the
Right.
acknowledgement that this is truly a calling that you never expected. And it's asking you to believe that you can do something that you didn't yet think you could do.
Right. And I think it's interesting because when he was diagnosed, it was almost like I went through, whether it was 12 or not, I don't know, but like a 12-step process, because you're grieving, you've lost something, whether anybody wants to admit it or not. You've lost that image of what you were prepared for since you were a little girl. If you dreamed of having kids, like, this is how it's going to be, I'm going to be a mom. And you get older and the things you're going to do with your kid. Well, I couldn't do those things, as many parents can't. So you go through the grieving process, denial, acceptance, but it's like a recovery program when your child is diagnosed with something that you have to go through. And I thought that was really interesting to think of it that way,
100%. I think actually, so I've been going back and reading some journals from years past, and I think very much it's a recovery. And I'm going to do an episode about this. When I'm looking back now, I think it's a recovery of the heart, because what I notice for myself as a mom is that maintaining an open, vulnerable heart to be in relationship with that child, my husband, friends, all my other children. I have 4 kids, so it's a lot of kids. And it's a lot of kids. And and so maintaining, healing the broken heart and keeping it open, knowing that it's not necessarily going to get easier. It's not necessarily going to get better. Like knowing, especially since my son does have medical diagnoses that may impact his longevity and quality of life,
Right.
that is the brokenheartedness that I think we can recover, but then also, like we talked about in the very early, can define us, but define us in a really beautiful and powerful way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, Ginger, I obviously have a lot of passion and heart when it comes to the conversations that you and I are having, and I can't wait to finish your book. Maybe we'll have to do another episode after like I finish the rest
Sure.
of the story. But
Sure.
as we wrap up, is there anything that's on your heart to share that we didn't talk about? Is there anything that you'd kind of like to say or share in closing?
I just want to emphasize again the reason for the book. I don't want mothers, and I say mothers just because I'm a mother. I mean parents, caregivers, but I'm just using mother because that's my identification. But I just don't I want them to understand and to embrace the fact that what they're feeling, what they're going through, the anger, the resentment. I mean, I resented neurotypical families. Like I would look at them and just think, oh, that must be nice, and thinking that I even thought that hurts now. I mean, it's still uncomfortable to say that, but I did think that, and I was mad. I was angry. I was disappointed. And to admit that I was disappointed that this was the child I was given, it didn't mean that I loved him any less, but I didn't know what to do with this. And I just really want to emphasize that those feelings are okay, that it's okay to feel that way. It's okay to admit that you feel that way, and that there's no shame in that whatsoever, and it took me a long time to come to terms with that. I mean, 10 years to write the book. Over those 10 years, I was still coming to terms with all that. I mean, because I was in the middle of it all. And that's just the big message to me through the book is just, you're okay. It's okay to feel these things that you're feeling. It's more what you do with them than it is that you're feeling them. You can feel them and it doesn't make you bad. It's not like you are acting on it and running away from the family, for more than half an hour.
Well,
it's okay to do that too.
It is okay. Yeah, for sure. And especially now in the time of COVID, I know obviously your son's up and out, but a lot of us are still in it. And so we're getting 7 days solid of our children. And I know for myself, that has been a challenge, that I'm noticing that my ability to be with some of the challenges is waning. And I'm noticing needing a much higher level of support and giving myself more space so that I can kind of, again, support myself so I can support him. And I want to support everybody to read your book. And we will have, I'm imagining there's going to be an easy link so that they can go purchase this book that we can put on the show notes. But why don't you tell people the best way to reach out to you?
There are several different ways that you can reach out to me. GingerMcGee.com. I am not as good about putting posts up as I was, but I'm trying to get better. So there are things on there that deal with being a mom and just lots of other stuff. I am also on Instagram at Ginger McGee Writer, WRITER. I have a He's Not Broken page on Facebook. It's just at He's Not Broken. If you reach out to me on any of those, I am very responsive. I love to hear from people who've read the book or who are interested in reading the book or who just have read something, on my blog or whatever. I am fueled by that. That inspires me to continue to write and to continue to be very open and honest in my writing, because when I hear people who have benefited from it, I mean, it just makes me want to cry. It's just so touching to me that I did that, and that's the whole purpose. That's the only reason that I did it.
Well, thank you for doing it. And thank you for putting your experience into words so that as other moms listen to your story and read your story, that they can more deeply connect to their actual feelings. And as you said, it is totally okay to feel all those feelings. And I just really admire the choice that you made to share your story. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. This was fun.
How much did you love that conversation? I wanted to hop on here as we wrapped up just to remind you to go ahead and click on the show notes so that you can reach out. If you feel any inkling of curiosity to explore the group, I invite you to lean into that. I have one small other request to make. If you haven't already taken a moment to rate and review the podcast, I would be profoundly grateful. The way that podcasts are promoted is by recognition of people liking and listening to them. So this just really helps other moms find it. Let's just help those other moms out that don't know yet that we exist. See you guys next week. One more thing before we officially wrap up this show. Sometimes when I'm listening to podcasts, I have the experience of wanting more. I'm listening at the very end thinking, I sure wish that episode didn't end. I invite you, if you feel in any way the same way, I invite you to the Special Needs Mom podcast community, which is a free group that I host on Facebook, where we as a community of fellow moms who listen to this podcast and are experiencing life in similar shoes, get to talk to one another, get to share stories, get to actually interact. I hope you'll consider joining. See you over there.